welcome campuses, yeah. We applaud there, yeah. Images from just yesterday at CityServe. You know, we began this year, for the first 3 months, we just talked about why did we plant One Life to begin with? Why did we get into this to start with? Where are we going? What are we doing? What really matters? And what we said was, though, is that once we've talked about that, April is our action month, primarily. And so it is that. It is crammed full of things, and CityServe is one of those. You know, there's so many things I wish we could talk about with CityServe and so many things that happen. I just love the sheer variety of the things that happen. Did you see the encouragement notes that went on the lockers? That was one of the things. There were people sorting clothes at nonprofits. They put in a drainage ditch over in Henderson. You know, and did you notice how sloppy, muddy everybody was? That was what was great. I mean, you guys turned out in the rain, just stood in the rain and dug the holes and did all kinds of crazy things. And it had to be one of my favorites was turning a building that was just bland into an artistic statement. Basically, that's what happened. That was a West Side thing that they did over there. And so all these different things, projects going on around the tri-state to live out this value. One of the key things we said we want to be about is don't just build a great church, build a great city. And that's what we're doing. Now, here's what's very, very important to know about that too, guys. We don't just do that on CityServe Day. CityServe Day is a way to lift that value up. And what's going on all year round is people are doing these kinds of things in relationship building and helping out in under-resourced neighborhoods and all the rest. So keep that in mind. Let's be praying towards that as we move forward. You know, it was a few years ago. I was in Barnes & Noble, which for me is like paradise. I mean, I love bookstores, I do. And I've got my coffee, I'm kind of looking over the books, and there's like a religious section here. And then as I pan to the left, I don't think it was labeled this, but it was basically the anti-religious section. And you could tell that the people writing these books thought these people were idiots, because you could just tell by the titles. One title stood out to me especially, was called Losing Faith in Faith. And the subtitle especially got me because it said, From Preacher to Atheist. I thought, okay, well, I didn't know that kind of thing happened, but apparently it does. I was over at our West Side campus, this has been a few years back as well, and I was back in the kids area, and I was just thanking people who were working back there with their kids, you know, people who were volunteering their time, or with kids, and there was a young couple that came up to me, and they said, we've never met you before, I wanted to meet you. But also while we're standing there, they had a 5-year-old boy, and he said, oh, by the way, little Johnny here had a question that for us that we couldn't answer, wonder if you can answer it. I thought, oh, great, you know, what was it, Johnny? Who made God? I think my answer was something like, shut up, kid, and just believe. You know, walked away. You know? So who made God? You know, as I look back over my life, I can remember, maybe you're this way, I can remember a lot of events from my past, especially when I was a little kid and going to grade school and all that, but I don't remember very many conversations. But I do remember one in particular. I went to first through fourth grade, I went to Hebron Elementary School, and I can remember being in the gym, probably second or third grade, and sitting in a little circle where we were talking about whether or not God existed. And one of the kids, I remember saying, he didn't believe, and here's why. Another one said he believed, and here's why. I want you to keep track of those 3 stories, and here's why. Because as we get into the content for today, as we're in this series called The Mind Project, and we're asking the question, do you have to sacrifice your mind to believe? I want to give you the why we're talking about the things that we're talking about. Because some of the things that we're going to talk about before we're done are going to feel a little heady at times and even philosophical. And some of you, your personality is, why are we talking about this? Can we bring the musicians back and just sing? But I want to give you the why. It's because you can be standing in Barnes & Noble's, minding your own business, drinking your coffee, and someone through a book can assault the very core beliefs that you hold dear, and do it with a lot of passion and do it with a lot of logic. You can have 5-year-olds, and you will ask you questions that, I don't remember what I said, quite honestly. I'm sure some of you are wondering, what'd you say? I didn't say shut up, kid, and believe. Okay, and I was kind of, for those of you who don't know me, every now and then I will kind of be a little sarcastic. But I remember I said, I did learn that 5-year-olds don't think in terms of analogies and metaphors. That's out. And there are kids in grade schools that are having conversations like this. So that's the why. You can be going through Netflix and you can come across documentaries that are made to assault the very things that we sang about a while ago. That's the why. I want to remind you of a passage from the New Testament we read several weeks ago. It's in 1 Peter. Listen to what it says again. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Now here's what I love. He tells you to do that, but then he gives the manner in which you're to do it. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior, that's huge when it comes to the city serve kind of stuff, in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. In other words, we're not out to win arguments. We're not out to rant on Facebook. It's just saying when people watch your life and they say, hey, why do you believe this stuff? What is it about it? You can give an answer in a calm and friendly and gracious manner. That's the goal. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to just pass along a basic concept that has helped me ever since I was in college. This is one of the most important things that has helped me to answer questions like were raised in that book that I went ahead and picked up out of curiosity of why the guy went from preacher to atheist. It's helped me in coffee shop conversations. It's helped me in conversations with my children about these things. And here's the most basic concept of all, and I want you to get if you don't get anything else when you walk away. It's be skeptical about skepticism. Be skeptical about skepticism. Learn to doubt doubts. Learn to doubt doubts. And I want you to, we're going to explain what that means and how to do that here in just a minute. But that's the most basic concept. When it comes to this whole thing of can you bring your brain to church or do you have to sacrifice your mind to believe? I would say you don't. But one way that you can, and I've used this little grid that I'm about to run you through on many, many conversations of people have kind of challenged the Christian faith and all the rest. Learn how to be skeptical about skepticism. And that's not just friends in coffee shops or kids, that's your own. We all have doubts kind of bubble up in our minds, and sometimes you need to do your own doubting. Now, if you want to do that, I'm going to just give you a few things to take today. If you want to doubt your doubts or be skeptical about skepticism, number one, remember everyone has a worldview. Everyone has a worldview. Now, what does that mean? Now, we're going to use this term a lot because it's actually in our vision statement. We introduced our vision statement not very long ago, a new one that we brought up, and it says this. Our vision statement is planting churches devoted to changing the secular worldview of the next generation. And every time I say it, I can just imagine some people out there going, okay, that's wonderful. I have no idea what that means. Why did you say that? We put the term worldview in there for a reason. It's because a worldview can also be kind of explained this way. It's an alternate set of beliefs. Now here's how this works. So I did, whenever I saw that book, Losing Faith in Faith, From Preacher to Atheist, I went ahead and picked it up. It's by a guy by the name of Dan Barker. Dan Barker is a guy who for 19 years, he was a pastor. He was just like me. And what was really a letdown, he was also a musician. I'm hoping he wasn't a bass player. I don't know what kind of musician he was. But for 19 years, he did what I did. And then he jettisoned the whole thing. And he and his wife, they're not only just stopped believing, but they are proactive. He's writing books. And they are the president of the Freedom From Religion Foundation now. Okay? And here was his first point, and actually I agree with it. As we asked for this, I read the preface in the first chapter. I didn't buy it. Not like I'm going to give him money for going from preacher to atheist, all right? So stood there in Barnes & Noble, and he said this. He said, you know what I notice Christians do? Is they struggle over this, you have to surrender your mind to believe. He said they don't do that for other religions. He said when they look at other religions, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or whatever else, they will use their logic, they will use their reason, and they will use evidence. They have a standard for other belief systems that they hold other belief systems to. But they themselves will often say about their own, well, you just got to believe it. And you wouldn't take that for now. I've had dialogues with Muslims. I have friends that are Muslims and familiar with their belief system. And it would be very frustrating if I pointed out a lack of evidence in a certain area if they just said, well, you just got to believe it. And ends the conversation. So Dan Barker said, if you're going to use that same logic and reason and evidence, point it to your own system. And he maintains, which I disagree with, that if you did that, you would jettison your belief just like he did. I disagree with that part. But here's what I would say if I was sitting and having coffee in Barnes & Noble with Dan Barker, though. I would say, why don't you do the same thing for your current belief system? You know why? Because he said he moved from preacher to atheist. Well, a move to atheism is not a move to nothing. No one living moves to nothing. Everybody has what you would call an alternate belief system from anything else. And that's what we label as a worldview. I use those interchangeably. An alternate belief system or worldview. I don't know if you know this or not, but if you are visiting with us, you're supposed to get a visitor packet. This is the ultra hip looking thing that was designed, not by me, but by our creative people. It has this little magnet, little door thing that opens up. Pretty cool. Has an audio from me on a CD, which is now ancient. I think we need vinyl I do a little message on here, but we give you a book. And the book is called The Reason for God, rather. It's written by a guy named Tim Keller. I told you about Tim Keller before, but Tim Keller is a guy who planted a church in Manhattan about 30 years ago. And everybody told him, you can't plant a church, a Bible-believing church in Manhattan. Those people are very, very skeptical, and they're out loud about it, and they're hard enough. It's never going to work. It's never going to work. But it did work. And thousands of people, young, sharp professionals, Columbia University students, flock into his church, and he preaches the Bible just like we do here. But what that book is him reflecting on 30 years worth of coffee shop conversations with skeptics. And one of the things that he says is very important to kind of lock this idea down that everybody has a worldview. He says this, quote, even as believers should learn to look for reasons behind their faith, which is what we've been challenging everybody to do, skeptics must learn to look for a type of faith hidden within their reasoning. All doubts, however skeptical and cynical they may seem, are really a set of alternate beliefs. So if I become an atheist, I've not just become a zero. I've become something. I believe something. How does this work? Well, when it comes to worldview, everybody has a worldview. Think of it this way. Your worldview is your alternate set of beliefs, or is a set of beliefs that you have. Your worldview is best defined as your answer to life's most basic questions. And we've said this before, but everybody has one, and everybody's answered these questions. Now, I'm going to give you a sampler platter of the kinds of questions worldview answers. Here they are. Where did it all come from? I mean, we're in the middle of the show. We showed up, you're here on the earth, you're hanging out, you're in Evansville or Henderson, you're looking around, and you're going, okay, I came in the middle of the production. Where did it all come from? Did it come from nothing? Did it come from something? Did it come from someone? We all have answers to those questions in our head. Here's another one. Where's it going? Is there a meaning? Is there a story? Is it an accident? Is it headed anywhere? Does my life have purpose or meaning? Is there anything going on behind this at all? Is it leading up to a grand conclusion of any kind? Here's a big one. Who are we? Are human beings just kind of accidental things that walk around that like to wear clothes, play basketball, listen to music, stuff like that? Is there something else going on there? A big one is, how do we know right from wrong? How do we know right from wrong? Where does that come from? Did we all get together on a committee and say, okay, murder's gonna be wrong and stealing's gonna be wrong, and there you go. And finally, here's a big one we know we all ask in the back of our mind. What happens when we die? As we all know we're going to. Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Do we come back as something, an ostrich? Or do we just blank? What happens? Now here's the thing. If all of us, whether consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally, have answered those questions. Now, I can anticipate some of you are like, no, I don't. Dude, listen, I want to make a good living. I want to try to be a good person. I want to raise my kids. I'm hoping to get them to Disney World, and I want to play some golf. I don't think about stuff like that. Leave me alone. And I would say maybe you don't think about it actively, but I guarantee you if we were having coffee, I could ask you, where do you think it all came from? I don't know. I don't think we can know. I'd say, boom, there's your answer. You don't think we can know. That's your answer. People say things, one of the most common statements I hear in life. It's like people think it's actually written in the Bible this way. Everything happens for a purpose. I believe everything happens for a purpose. Everything. I lost that job or whatever. Everything. That's a worldview statement. You're saying that everything happens for a purpose. Or people will be at a funeral. I was at a funeral this past week. And people will say things like, I know they're in a better place. I know they're in a better place. See how that works? Everybody has one. Even Dan Barker. And when he went to atheism, he didn't go to just a blank. And here's why this is so important. Because sometimes as Christian people, those of you who consider yourselves believers, sometimes it feels like we're all shield and no sword. Like people, okay, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this belief? And they beat up on your beliefs to the point where you're like, you feel like you're on the defense all the time. And what I've learned to do, and it's actually kind of enjoyable, quite frankly, is to say, okay, I understand your objections to my beliefs, but what about yours? Well, I'm a doubter. I'm a skepter. A skepter. I'm a skepter. I get that all the time. It's a new thing. We're introducing it in the lexicon. For all you skepters out there, we're with you. We believe in you. But you turn around and say, articulate your beliefs. And that brings me to the second thing that's very, very important about this. Understand the implications of worldviews. Now, this is where it's going to sound philosophical, and some of you are like, why would I care about that? And I don't understand what you're talking about here. Think about it for just a second. Every single answer to those questions a while ago that the Bible gives us, atheism gives us, Hinduism addresses that, Islam does, every religion, every system addresses those questions and others. They all have implications, logical implications. If we came from nothing, then we're going nowhere. It's kind of how that works. Now, to demonstrate how this works, there was a film done several years ago that captured on film a guy that's now passed away back in 2015. His name was William Provine. William Provine was a professor of philosophy of science at Cornell University, okay? So this is not a dumb guy, all right? William Provine, but it wasn't, he grew up in Tennessee, he grew up in church, he considered himself a Christian at one point in his life, and he was exposed to biology and evolutionary thinking, and he just embraced the whole thing, because true raw belief in evolution, incidentally, he's gonna use these interchangeable, is the belief, the way Darwin presented it actually is the belief that if you wanna believe in God, that's fine, but it's not required. Life and all of its variety can come without any aid from God at all. That's what true evolutionary thinking is. So he got a hold of this and he finally jettisoned the whole deal. But what I love about him is that he follows it by giving all the true implications of those beliefs. And he says it boldly and without apology. Now, this doesn't mean that this is what all atheists believe. I just love the fact that he is just full on. And they said when classes would gather, I'm at Cornell University, I'm walking in, feeling awesome. He would give this speech to his students that the implications of all this stuff is this. So listen to his words.
No gods, no life after death, no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning in life, and no human free will are all deeply connected to an evolutionary perspective. You're here today and you're gone tomorrow, and that's all there is to it. But it starts by giving up an active deity, then it gives up the hope that there's any life after death. When you give those two up, the rest of it follows fairly easily. You give up the hope that there's an imminent morality. And finally, there's no human free will. If you believe in evolution, you can't hope for there being any free will. There's no hope whatsoever of there being any deep meaning in human life. We live, we die, and we're gone. We're absolutely gone when we die.
He should write greeting cards. You know? Can you imagine him showing up at visitation for your family? Well, I know he's in a better place. No, he's not. He's gone, he's nowhere, it's nothing. His life had no meaning, and and just kind of exit. No, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but this is a Cornell University philosopher. This is not someone who's dumb. This is someone who's thought these things through, and he just embraced it. Worldviews have implications. I was talking to an atheist friend of mine about that, and he made a very interesting point. He said, well, okay, I'll get that. And even, did you notice, and we didn't even talk about this, did you know that it's a debate inside the atheist world of whether or not you have free will? Because the implication is if it all started by accident, if it all started from nothing, there was no purpose, there was no design, there was not a designer, there wasn't a guiding intelligence at all. Every life is nothing but a physical thing. It's a part of an accidental machine. Many of them will argue that means you don't have any free will. You think you chose that shirt today, but that was chosen by the machine from all eternity. I kind of want to use it as an excuse. If you don't like this shirt, I can say, well, it wasn't even me. It was my lack of free will that kind of brought this. Now, as a Christian person, I have to take responsibility for the shirt. I did choose this, and sorry about it for those who are offended by that. Implications. And I was talking to my atheist friend, and he said, well, okay, yeah, I don't believe there's free will. Life is meaningless. But he said, just because something's unpleasant doesn't mean it's not true. I said, oh, okay, that's a pretty good point. The more I thought about that, though, you can also turn the tables on that. Many people, I think, jettison the Christian faith because of certain unpleasantries. My friend was exactly right. Just because something's unpleasant doesn't mean it's not true. It just means it's unpleasant. You have that, you've talked to your kids about that principle before, right? Just because it's unpleasant doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You know, you've had those speeches. You probably said it just like that. He's right. But a number of people just have rejected the Christian faith because it happens to be unpleasant, maybe. That it's saying that there is a heaven and that there is a hell and there's a God who pays attention to your moral behavior. And that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, that it seems narrow, it seems too limited. Interesting to think about. Worldviews have implications. That's something to keep track of. And finally, this. If you want to, be skeptical about skepticism, think of the gospel, the story of Jesus, who he is, what he's done, his life after his life, his death on the cross, and his resurrection. Not just as a worldview, not just as a heaven ticket. Think of the gospel as a worldview, not just as a heaven ticket. Many of us, if we're being honest, we kind of got into this game because, oh God, forgive me of my sins. I don't want to be punished when I die. I want to go to heaven. And we kind of take it that way. And that is a piece of it. But what happens is that it can kind of stay there. And what we talked about for the first 3 months of our year is how the Bible declares very clearly that Jesus is the source of all things. He's the ground of all reality. That he's just the opposite of what William Provine was saying. That he is the giver, he's the creator, he's the purpose giver, he's all those things. And we need to learn to say that. That's what we reflect when we do City Serve. We believe by digging in the dirt that he put there and putting paint on walls and doing things for one another, that it does mean something. That you don't just live and die and then you're gone and it was all meaningless. We believe it's all meaningful, that every stroke of a paintbrush or movement of a bulldozer to help people is meaningful, and God smiles on that. See how that works? Think of this thing as a worldview, and it's actually liberating and helpful. Where did it all come from, according to the Christian faith? From a personal, triune, in relationship, all-powerful, all-knowing, loving God who created us like an artist creates his art pieces. See how that changes the feel of things? Christian people could, just based on their worldview, could make a lot better greeting card than Dr. Provine. Where's it all going? You know, your brain literally, the reason you're attracted to story, anytime a little story comes up, your brain, they've discovered that your brain is kind of designed for story. You're attracted to story, you think in story. When you can put something as a story, you understand it better. You know, the Bible says where we're all going is we're part of a grand story. It is headed somewhere, and it's his story. I've heard this played out in so many different people and their views of life. And maybe you identify with this. I've heard many, many people talk about their conscious running from God. Were you ever that? Maybe you're that way now. I know a guy that was literally just kind of put the thing on. He could tell God's after me. God wants to be a part of my story, and I don't want him to be a part of the story. And I resisted. And actually, literally, he came to an intersection one night, and he could tell this wrestling is going on inside of his heart. And he knew to turn left was to go to a party and run away from God consciously. He was thinking this way. If I go left, I'm just going to run away from God. If I go right, I'm going home. I'm going to get before God and be okay. But then he did what a lot of people do. He was like, God, just give me a sign. We've all done that. Give me a sign, any sign. But I'm going left. As soon as he turned left, the car shut down just out of nowhere. He said he'd never done that, ever. And he's a faithful churchgoer to this day. That's where that comes. He's just part of the story. It is. Who are we? That's another question. This is super important. Who are we as human beings? If you are like William Provine, we really are just accidental animals that happen to wear clothes and play basketball and like music. But there's no purpose, there's no meaning behind any of it. I was at a conference this past week, and a central idea that kept coming up was the church needs to really take the lead on this racial prejudice thing that's going on, the racial divide that's happening in our country. And I started embracing that more and more, and I was thinking, we should have been doing it all along. Because the Christian worldview says from the second that you're conceived, you're a human being, and that means you are endowed by that Creator with true value that you have by virtue of the fact you're a human being. If you're a human being, you have intrinsic value. You were created in the image of God, and it was a travesty that the church led the way towards the opposite, where we made it where the color of skin somehow makes you less dignified. It's a horrible sin that we allowed ourselves into because our worldview is just the opposite. We have a basis on which to say everybody, no matter what your background, the country you're from, the color of your skin, any of that, you have value if you're a human being, and we can live that way. How liberating is that, and how meaty and deep it is. How do we know right from wrong? We talked about this last week. I'm going to take it back a little bit. Speaking of that racial prejudice thing, I can't repeat enough. Martin Luther King, that we all admire, Martin Luther King Jr., he wrote what drove him and much of his thinking was based on was this concept of what philosophers call transcendent morals. In other words, there wasn't a committee that sat around and said murder's wrong. We believe that if every single person on the earth became a racist tomorrow, it would still be wrong. It doesn't stop being wrong just because people think it's okay. That's what we mean by transcendent. It means apart from, above, and over. This is an absolutely crucial idea because that's why one person can stand against the whole world and make a proclamation based on justice. And then finally, what happens after we die? I was at a funeral this past week, and the preacher was very good because I knew the person had faith in Christ that died, and he was able to say with proclamation, he said, the Bible says that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And it says it's better by far that you and I literally, because of a biblical worldview, can face death and know that it's better by far. That we can look at something that's really, honestly, if we're being really, really deep down honest, as scary as it can be, we can rest. And we can say, I know that it's going to be okay. And it's sealed by the fact of the resurrection. Guys, remember that. Think of the gospel not as just a heaven ticket, but as an entire worldview that gives us, if you're in business, if you're in education, if you're in medicine, if you're in the arts, discover it, go deep with it, and really discover how can I reflect the beauty of this great story that we have. Now, at that point, I'm going to stop, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. Because as lead pastor over our 3 campuses, Henderson, West, and East, I want to take all those ideas and just kind of pause. And for the remaining moments, we're going to release you to pray here in just a moment. But I want to challenge you to do a couple of things. April is Action Month. We did City Serve, and again, guys, it was such a blast seeing people just run out onto sloppy, muddy, rainy fields to do stuff. It was so amazing. And that's part of who we are. I want to challenge you during the month of action to do 2 other things. Number 1, Sarah talked about it a while ago. Next Saturday, there's a training going on from a guy named Michael Licona. And the training, we're offering it because we want you to be able to sit in coffee shops and in break rooms and just give an answer. And his expertise is in the area of the historical reliability of the New Testament, because a lot of people doubt that stuff. Why would you believe a 2,000-year-old book? Get life advice from it. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, here's why, and here's why I can trust it. He's just going to give you equipment for that, so we're going to take a 3-hour block to do that. And then the following week, the weekend of the 28th and the 29th, we're doing this thing called the Mind Project of Production. Now, what I love about that is we went out in the city, and people are to see our behavior as we're building and helping and all that. But never forget, we have a message to proclaim. The Bible says that we're supposed to proclaim that worldview, that we're supposed to proclaim Jesus' lordship over all. So we're going to gather at our East Side campus, all of us, on Saturday night and 2 Sunday mornings. And what I love about this, you saw how much we were able to do collectively with all of our talents and all the people who were able to do building and painting and landscaping. Think of the project as us together presenting the message. It's not gonna be just me, don't panic. I'll talk a little bit, but we've got artists and musicians and lighting people and production people and our guest services and our kids ministry. We're welcoming people into our building to present the message to them. I was having a conversation yesterday at the after party of City Serve, and I love this conversation. One guy was saying, man, there's this guy in my life. I'm trying to get him to come. I think it would really impact it. I think he'd love the music and all the rest. He said, I'm trying to get him to come. I think I'm close. I want to challenge that to be you and me as well. Here in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to pray for a couple of things, and that's one of them. We're going to do this thing called the Mind Project of Production, and we together are going to present the message. And here's what I can promise you. I'm pretty confident it's going to be really good, but I can guarantee it's going to be really different, all right? It's going to catch people off guard. They're going to come into a church, and we will eliminate all kind of past biases about how churches do things within about the first 5 minutes, okay? That's the goal. And just talk to people and give them the message in a creative and artful way, and hopefully a powerful way. But here's my challenge before I let you back to your campus. Number one, pray that God, if you're a believing person, will open a door to somebody in your life that you can invite them. I've got 3 names running around in my head right now. I may do all 3. I'm just praying that God will really open up a great opportunity to invite someone. Number 2, pray about your role. We're asking everybody to attend one with a friend and then serve one, whether in guest services or kids, and just pray, God, what do you want me to do? And then finally, those of you who may be exploring, during that time of reflection, what are your beliefs about those questions I asked? Do you know what the implications are? Is that who you are? Have you explored it through that grid before? And just use the time of prayer, and we always have prayer people at the front in all of our services. And so we're just gonna take a time just to go to our hearts, and you can come up and be prayed for, or just be on your own, but pray about those things, would you? At this point, I'm gonna turn it back over to our campuses.